Hello everybody, and I am here to start another reading vlog. This is going to be a spoiler-filled vlog, as you will have seen in the thumbnail and title, and it is a vlog for The Veiled Throne by Ken Liu. As you can tell, I started, but I'm really not that far in. I just read the first chapter yesterday. So, The Veiled Throne is the third book in the series, so if you did not know that fact before clicking on this video, then probably best to click out of the video, because as indicated, this is gonna contain spoilers, mainly for this book, but of course any event leading up to this book is also free for spoiler discussion. So let's dive into it. So The Veiled Throne, I'm eager to start it now. I was procrastinating on it, definitely. Like, first of all, I just wasn't getting the prompts that I needed to put this book into my reading month, and then I was just having so much fun with picking up stuff on a whim that, you know, like I hadn't planned for this month at all, that this one became kind of a chore in that sense, because this was like the book that I had to get through, and I mean, let's be honest, I never have to get to a book, it's just the pacing that I want to for getting through this series, but this started to become a chore. But yesterday I read the first chapter and I was like, yes, okay, it ain't a chore. I'm going to love getting back into this world and getting back to these characters, though we're not starting with a favorite character. So another thing that was already immediately clear when picking up this book is we get two maps. So we get a map from one side of the Wall of Storm and the other side of the Wall of Storm. So we also get the map on the Liuku side of the world. I'm going to stop holding it up now because my hand is very tired from that. And so we are going to be spending our time across both continents. I had already kind of at the end of my Wall of Storms vlog indicated that I assumed that that was going to be the case because of the fact that Prince Timu is now on the other side of the Wall of Storms, and so I assumed that we were going to follow at least part of that. I think I said there that I'm hoping for like this entire book to kind of just have two focuses, like that we're focusing on that each side of the Wall of Storm is focused on their own internal conflicts and on kind of like, I don't know, strategically prepping for another conflict between the two, but that we don't yet get a new clash between the two, but we'll see what ends up happening in this book. But so yeah, we've just started the book. We are traveling back in time to the very first, like very start of when, not the very start, but like more or less the start of when we went into book 2, I guess. Kuni has just been made emperor on the Dara side of things, and that is when the expedition of Mapidure lands in Liuku, and so it's a little bit behind that clearly, because the character that we're following is some sort of like, I'll refer to her as a general within the Liuku society. And she, at one point, is kind of where she shouldn't be, and that is basically clearly at the landing site where all of these ships of the Dara Empire have landed. And so there is a reference to these ships already, and it's clear that the news of their landing has kind of spread out already. So it's probably a little bit after that has happened. And she is there met by the princess of this empire, who basically knocks her unconscious at the end of that. I do not like this princess. I'm curious to see if we get some viewpoints from her perspective, and if maybe that makes me kind of change my mind about her. Mainly I just dislike her because of the way that she manipulated Timu and basically forced him to have her kids against his wishes, and so forcing him into a position where he kind of had to choose to stay there and to kind of renounce his family ties. It is of course still always his own choice, but she definitely did maneuver him into a narrow spot. And so yes, not my favorite character, but we'll see, maybe I'll change my mind about her. But there is hope for this general, and what I'm definitely kind of hoping for this book to do is for me to get attached to somebody on the other side of the conflict, because in Wall of Storms they are very much the enemy. The way that they treat the people from the Dara Empire, the way that they treat the people that we've grown closely attached to, is horrible and makes us very empathetic or whatever, however you want to say that, towards them. And so what I kind of want this book to do is to kind of force me in a more nuanced or gray area when it comes to looking at these two sides of the conflict, where I have stakes, personal emotional stakes invested on both sides. So that is my hope. That is kind of why I want two sides of the wall to be looked at separately for like almost an entire book long, so that I can grow those attachments to both sides, and then crush my heart in book 4 by having casualties on both sides, I guess. But yeah, we'll see. This is all speculation. So I'm here to talk to you a little bit about the first part of the Veiled Throne, because I have finished that first part yesterday. So I'm a little bit curious to see where things are going now, because this kind of feels like a super long prologue, because this is 94 pages of going back in time. Basically, we've looked at the time in which the expedition of Mapudere first lands, and going like some years into the future. I'm kind of looking at the evolution of the relationships between the Liuku and the Dara people from that perspective, kind of seeing how the people of Dara, when they first landed, basically immediately kind of subjected the Liuku and was treating them like slaves until the tide kind of turned, and so they were like basically raping women, enslaving Liuku people, mistreating them, beating them down. And in that context, like one of the characters were like first introduced to it in the first chapter, she meets the father of Zomi, and kind of sees that there are different sides to the Dara peoples, because she sees that this is like he himself is bottom of the barrel in Dara society, and so he gets treated very badly as well. And so she kind of starts to feel empathy for him and starts to feel some nuance in her experience with the Dara people. But then she also sees that through his storytelling, she starts to see some sort of like fundamental differences between these two societies, where the Liuku are clearly very religious, and they very much hold true to their stories. Their stories are their source of truth, and so a story will always be an exact rendering of what has been told before, because, you know, this is truth being passed down, or that is how they experience it in any case. Whereas Oka, I think his name is, so Zomi's father, is very much an embellisher, a storyteller, somebody who kind of tweaks the story here and there in order to suit the way that he thinks his audience will best react to it. And so when, I think her name is something like Goskan, when she kind of finds out that he's been kind of tempering this with the story in order to suit her taste and kind of to make it more palatable for a Liuku audience, then she kind of immediately sees these huge differences between their two societies and kind of steers clear from him, because if he is willing to kind of tweak the story here or there, then there is no real source of truth, and they're just basically spinning stories and spinning reality to suit their own needs. And so, but this entire first 94 pages has basically just been kind of looking back in the past, looking back at earlier stages of some of the characters that we've grown to know in the previous book, though characters that we haven't really spent too much time with neither. And then this one character of this, I'm gonna call her a general again, who we, I believe, haven't been introduced to before. But I'm interested to see like what that's how that is going to come back later within the story, because this is all taking place within the past, and so it feels like a super long prologue, because we are not kicking off where we left off. We are not jumping forward as we would typically see in the next book within a series. We've basically jumped back and given a lot of sort of like context about what was going on the other side of the Wall of Storms during that whole time which we were following the Dara side of things, because we had kind of course gotten a report of what had happened from the perspective of Rwanza, and so we kind of knew some of the things that were happening over there, but so now we've got to experience some other aspects of it. We got to hear some of the stories that they tell. I did love that, sort of like the meeting of two cultures and the exchange of stories. But yeah, I'm curious to see that kind of come back throughout the rest of the book. If you hear some rain sounds in the back, that's my apologies for the ASMR if you don't like it, but I really like rain, so I have the big window open in my living room, so that might be caught up here. And there definitely will be some cat meows throughout this as well, because Faith is enjoying balcony rain time, but she also feels the need to come and talk to me about it every few minutes. So, but I'm here to give an update about the Veiled Throne by Ken Liu. So I am about 50 pages away or so from finishing the second section, and so far it's been really interesting because the second section we have fully we have fully looked into this, the perspectives of Thera and her new betrothed Torvak, something like that. And we very much zoomed in on them. Like, it's not like we've only gotten their perspective, but we've looked at them and a chase that is going on between them and a Ryuku crew that has basically hijacked one of the Dara airships that had been a part of Mapidure's expedition so many years back. And so Thera and Torvak have just left the scene where we ended book 2 on, and they are basically see this airship in the distance, and so a chase ensues between the two, where the Ryuku are very much in need of basic provisions, and so they think that if they can capture this ship that Thera and Torvak are on, then they can steal their provisions and get by a little bit further, because they don't know how to cross the wall of storms, and they do have a Garanoffin, is that how they're called, with them, or multiple even, that could definitely mean that they could take over this ship. And so what follows is 100 pages of strategy between the two, of figuring out how one is going to capture the other ship, but also of the others coming up with new ways to thwart those intentions and new strategies to deal with this. And I really like Thera in this because she's very aggressive in her strategy. She's not she's not just going for maybe the obvious sort of let's sacrifice one person to safeguard the lives of the entire crew. No, she is coming up with these plans that are very much based off of new research, research that's still in its infancy, and basically trying out stuff. And you can clearly see, or it's clearly presented as being the case, that she has these sort of look, these are plans that make sense and that will most likely end in result, it will most likely end in a positive result, and then there are sort of the backup plans that are look, these are crazy plans, but if we need to resort to them, we definitely will. And so I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed looking at this plan unfold, seeing the kings here and there and how that messed up the plan. So originally they had this plan of planting these sort of bombs all around the ship, but then there's one guy who is on the ship accidentally stumbles upon the Garanoffins, and so in his escape from the Garanoffins, these bombs get set off earlier, and so they have less time to bomb the entire ship as they originally intended, so they have to resort to other methods. And then I really like the method of just using research into whales and the whale behavior to utilize their knowledge of whales to get these whales to kind of help them out, to trick these whales into helping them out basically. And so throughout this entire more or less 100-page sequence, I think, we've been following the two sides, the Ryuku side and the Dara side, and I really enjoyed zooming in like that. And it's really interesting to contrast that with the first book, because I feel so far in this book, not a whole lot has happened to some extent. We have basically had that prologue that looked at this one tiny little bit of the history of what has taken place. And then now we've had these 100 pages or so that have really zoomed in on sort of like what will be a few hours, or like I guess it was longer than that, but you know what feels like just like a few hours of action, which in a movie would be like a few minutes, or like maybe 20 minutes in a movie, you know, like something like that. So I really enjoyed zooming in that much, because if we contrast that with the first book where, you know, like hundreds of years seem to be passing in the space of like one chapter, it's very interesting to see this one take a completely different approach. But so yeah, we've left behind that chase with the Dara fleet being, you know, like victorious over the Liuku, but we also have two Liuku's, like stowaways, not really, but like two Liuku captives, not even, that have made it onto the Dara ship at this point in time. And I do like that dynamic actually, and I hope we get to see that more, or see these three races kind of more confronted with one another's differences, and hopefully come to some sort of an agreement between them. But so yeah, we have this sort of like discussion now about, you know, like their different religions that we can get a look at from the three perspectives. And I really liked this sort of like conflict arising when they're kind of discussing food, because food is so, like, it's the heart and soul of a culture, you know, food and language. And so them discussing like various like small variations of like culinary traditions, and being like the two cultures coming from the different side of the wall of storms, so the Liuku and the Agon, I think, and they basically do share more similarities, it seems like, in their cuisine, as in they do eat similar things, but then they prepare them in a very different way, and so you get these sort of like fights occurring about like what the best way is to prepare this or that dish. And so I really enjoyed that sort of like little scene being in there. And so now we have this interesting new addition to our cast, because we actually have a god walking amongst us, because the gods were kind of debating and like looking at like how have we been serving the human race, how have we been trying to get them to act accordingly, and maybe we need to take a different approach. And one of the gods has decided that he wants to go down to the human realm, and so he is sent down. And interestingly enough, he kind of totally loses his memories and all that. He doesn't remember who he is, and so we get this stowaway on board, who's this girl whose name I've forgotten in the meantime, but that's basically this god. And so it's interesting to get this character in there, because this character is clearly like, is very much at this point in time set up as being like the challenger of the way things are done, the challenger of looking at these different cultures from the perspective of somebody new to this world, somebody who does not have a frame of reference. And so her challenging the way things have always been done, the way that they view one another, and the differences between them, and how they might grow closer to each other. So yeah, I'm enjoying it a lot. I wanted to give you an update now so that I can continue on reading now, because I do feel like I've gotten through a big chunk, and I wanted to kind of give you my thoughts upon that as well right now before going back and like reading a little bit further into it. Alright, I finished the second part, and yeah, I'm very happy with how that part ended. I love seeing the relationship of Teyra and Tarvak. Is that the name? So I love that this is like, you know, a relationship that grew out of a diplomatic solution, and how, you know, Teyra kind of describes it at the end, like she entered into this relationship just as a way to help save her people. She entered into this relationship when she was in another relationship with a woman that she deeply loves, but that doesn't mean that she cannot grow a space in her heart for Tarvek. And so I love seeing this relationship bloom, blossom, seeing the communication, because in this part of the book there was something that was kind of happening that like was due to, I guess, not miscommunication, but lack of communication. So they end up arriving at the Agon settlement, where Tarvak's uncle is basically the ruler. Tarvak is the son of the ruler's sister, and so both of those seem to be like revered as the, you know, like new leaders, but it's the uncle who actually holds the power. And there is some like play of power happening at the dinner table there, where his uncle is basically trying to establish his dominance and kind of trying to put a spanner in the works of this political marriage alliance, because when Tarvek went across the Wall of Storms to try and find the Dara people in order for them to establish an alliance to rebel against Liuku, it seems like his uncle wasn't necessarily all that invested in having this actually take place, and so he doesn't really see any benefits to this alliance with the Dara people. He says like the Dara seem to be a people that is on the verge of extinction, that is basically desperately seeking for our help, and so the only reason he kind of wants to reach out to them would be like, you know, if you enter into this alliance as like a fully entailed to us basically as being our vassals, not our allies, then we want to continue on. But Teyra's like, no way, that's definitely not what we're gonna be doing. But at that point in time, there is some sort of like tension between uncle and nephew, and she kind of questions Tarvek's motives here. She's kind of like, you know, what are you doing? Why are you trying to basically seem to be like pushing to become the leader of these people? Let him keep the leadership. We don't really need that. You know, the survival of Dara is the most important thing, and there is some miscommunication, there is some misunderstanding there, where either he's not fully aware of the fact that she doesn't fully understand all of the implications here, or he's just not communicative enough about what is really at stake here and what she is potentially going to be sacrificing in order for the survival of Dara. So more communication was needed in this moment, and I like that by the end of this section we do come back to that. We do have Teyra saying like, you know, you should have told me at that point in time, because what it turns out to be transpiring is that if he is not the leader of these people, if his uncle remains above him, then his uncle actually has the higher claim to Teyra, and so his uncle is basically going to try and marry her instead of him. And so I'm happy to see that we don't go that route, because the moment that it became clear to me that this is what happened, that this was what was happening, I was like, no, I have just grown to care for these two people together, which kudos, because basically we've just seen them together for like 100 pages or something like that. It's not like we've, like they had any sort of relationship when we last saw them in the previous book. But so kudos for establishing this relationship, and even for establishing that relationship, even though you're cutting out a big chunk of time there, because as indicated, like we had like a huge sequence of like 100 pages that seemed to be taking a few hours, but then we also have a big time jump where it's like, oh, they've been together for a year since that whole sort of like chase scene that we had been minutely following. So we do have occasionally like these huge chunks of times that are just like ripped out of it, and that you just find out about in like one paragraph, you know, it's just like two mentions, I think, of the fact that like 1 year has passed. But so we have a whole year that has passed in which a whole lot of groundworks are laid for this relationship, but even though we don't get to see those, we feel that. We feel the foundation in this relationship. We feel the mutual respect, love, understanding that they have for one another. And so I've grown to care for this as a relationship of mutual respect, understanding and love. And so I was like, don't rip this away from me. So I'm very happy that Teyra realized what was happening, and that even though we had that whole sort of like, he's already gone, there's nothing you can do, he's already exiled himself type of moment, she's like, no way, I am not marrying this uncle. We are leaving and we are tracking down Tarvek, because I am not gonna just like sacrifice this union, this relationship for the survival of Dara. And so, yeah, I love that moment. I love the moment afterwards in which they communicate with one another, and she's kind of indicating like, you know, you need to let me know when I'm doing something with implications that I'm not aware of. You need to let me in on these decisions, even if you maybe already assume that you know that I'm going to make that decision. Just we need to make these sort of decisions as a unit, as a whole. We need to discuss them and we'll come to a solution together. So I love that. I love these two together. I love how she was also talking about, you know, this whole section has very much shown the tensions between these different cultural groups, and a lot of it has like talked about like the use of the word like not talked about, but at the very beginning we were always seeing the use of like the word barbarian, and so there were very clear disdain towards the Liuku people. I mean, understandably, they've just had this whole sort of like traumatic encounter with the Liuku, who they weren't even aware of existing before that. But so you have this sort of like disdain towards these other cultures, these cultures that were seen as being beneath them. And so we're growing to understand one another more, we're growing to see the value in the other, and this is what Taylor definitely sees here in this final sort of section of part 2, where she's actively contemplating at some point in time about how much she can learn from these people, how much knowledge is there in just aspects of their culture, aspects of their life, of their views, of the way that they interpret the world around them that can be useful to them. And that goes for everybody in this world, you know. That's part of the reason why I love traveling, and part of the reason why I love reading is opening up perspective and opening up my mind to other ways of thinking. And so I loved seeing that within this book as well. And that was kind of in part what I was a little bit frustrated with at some point, when this whole you know, like conversation was happening between Torvak and his uncle, in which he wanted to be the one who's riding the Garanoffin, but his uncle wants to be the one who's riding the Garanoffin, and she just kind of like, yeah, just let it slide. It was clear from the perspective of a reader at least, that there was more going on there, and she even indicates that there were some tensions building there again, and that's kind of why she was shutting it down. But there are tensions there for a reason, and so at that point in time I was also a little bit frustrated with her for just being like, just shooting it down without necessarily consulting with him to see like, look, what is going on here, why do you want this? But all in all, that was happening on both fronts. So she realized something was going on but just shut it down without necessarily asking for his input. He was hearing her shut him down, and rather than providing the context for why he was doing this, he chose like to let it slide and to afterwards have this sort of like conversation about what her goals and objectives were, or what their goals and objectives were, without providing her with a reason why he was asking that, you know. Like, sure, she's gonna say the goal is the survival of Dara, you know, that's the most important thing. But if the context is not clear to her, if she doesn't hear like, am I worth sacrificing to reach this goal, then, you know, it's an unfair question. But so yeah, I love that a lot, and I'm very eager to dive into the next portion now, which is why I just had to sit down and shoot this reaction shot, because I want to go straight into the next part. I am kind of worried that, you know, each part is gonna look at different people, because we had that first part that I said that felt like a prologue. Now we have this whole Dara and Darvik section. I'm kind of worried that the next section is going to be like maybe the Dara court, or we're going to look at Tiro, is that his name? The brother who is also on that side of, who's with the Liuku people. But that having been said, probably, regardless of where we go, I am going to be very much invested the way that I was invested with this section very early on. Right. What to say? I mean, I've continued for a further 6 chapters more or less, and we are definitely not following like one set of characters for every single part here, because we have now intermingled. So in this third part we've had the perspectives of Gia and her court, we've had perspectives of Dara and Takval on their end, and I had wrongfully interpreted, I had rightfully interpreted, never mind, that's It's not about them. And then the third that we've seen is Timu, is that his name? Always keep on forgetting it. Timu, and so the eldest son of Kunigaru and his family. And I'd wrongfully assumed that they were back on the other side of the Wall of Storms, but now it turns out that, I mean, I'm sure that this was explained at the end of book 2, and maybe I even realized it at that point, I've just forgotten it, but they are stuck on the wrong side of the Wall of Storms, so they're stuck on the Dara side of the Wall of Storms, and they have some sort of like peace treaty going on with the Dara Empire, which results in the Dara Empire sending them basically resources every month or so to help with their survival, and in exchange for peace. One sort of like guiding principle that we see with Thera and Timu both is that, you know, these are both people who are in intercultural relationships, and they are both people who are stuck within a group that is not predominantly their cultural identity. So on the side of Thera, this is by wish, you know, she decided to get married to Takval, she decided to move to Agon and have this diplomatic marriage, but she is now in Agon society, mainly surrounded by Agon people, and her children are clearly also very much influenced by the Agon culture that they're growing up around. And so as I was saying in the previous part, I felt like, you know, these are two different cultures meshing, and it's lovely to see Thera realizing that she has to listen to the other culture, but then apparently 80 years later, because we've had an 80-year time jump more or less, I guess, it seems like she hasn't really learned all that much, and that she is still considering them as barbarians. She now has 2 kids together with Takval, but she still refers to the Agon people as barbarian, and she still has this sort of prejudiced view about her culture, about the way that she was brought up, thinking like that is automatically the better way of doing things. And so she's just like, yeah, I'm just asking them to change their ways because, you know, my way is the better way. And I do like that we have now gotten to the point where she's like come to realize that, you know, I don't actually remember, but I think, no, I don't fully remember who it was, but somebody basically talked her into realizing that, you know, she was just looking at things from a very privileged perspective and from a very one-dimensional perspective, and that, oh yeah, I know who it was. So it was that kid who's actually the god whose name I cannot remember, but so she kind of got Thera to realize that basically she has just been very closed off to this other society and to their way of life, and to how there is a lot of value in that as well, and that perhaps she should just learn to open up her mind to this other perspective, because, you know, she is just saying like, yeah, my kids are not Aegon, but to the Aegon they are. And the kid also opens up her mind to the idea of like, you know, these Aegon are very much unwilling to change their ways because they are afraid that their kids won't actually be Aegon kids anymore. They will have been Darified, because to be Aegon is just about the cultural traditions, the same way that Thera is worried that her kids are losing the link to the culture that she grew up in. And we see that as well with Timu and his kids. You know, they are raised in a society that is very much Liuku and very much looks down upon the Dara Empire. And so his kids don't want to be associated with the Dara people, because, and there it's even stronger, because there it's also coming from the mother who is reinforcing this idea of strength, of the strong Liuku and the weak Dara. And so because his kids are both boys especially, they are very much susceptible to this idea of not wanting to be perceived as weak. No, they're not both boys. It's mainly the boy who is susceptible to this, and the girl seems to be more sort of like clinging to her father, and maybe therefore also more open to his way of seeing things. But so yeah, we see both parents kind of having to deal with this thematic that is very much a immigrant type of thematic, you know, the link to the home country and the loss of that link and the loss of sort of like a cultural legacy as we move further away from the generation that has actually spent all their life there. You know, we see Tara trying to get him to eat the food that she loves from her homeland, trying to learn the language, trying to get them to follow certain customs like learning to write, which aren't important for the Agon, but that which are very much basic for the Dara people. So I thought that was really interesting to look at. When it comes to Gia is just such an annoying character for me, because she is like a character who is so convinced that she is in the right and that her way of seeing things is the right way of seeing things, that she is closed off to commentary, closed off to the idea of listening to others and what take and their perspective. She is so jaded by the world that she can only interpret things in the worst way possible. And that's not to say that I think that Firo, is that his name? Is necessarily like right in his views, because he is very much like the warrior type of character. He wants to, you know, like take back the honor of their people, reclaim the land, free the imprisoned people, and while those are definitely like freeing that land, freeing those imprisoned people is definitely like good motivation, but it to some extent also just feels like his belief is like there needs to be a war in order for us to move on from this. There needs to be bloodshed at the beginning of this, or nothing will get done. So he is very militaristic in his approach, and I do agree with Gia there in that you know, conflict doesn't solve anything, or doesn't solve everything. And so his sort of like insistence on conflict is just as rigorous as her sort of like her own views on how she on like how what she is doing and how she wants to tackle things is the correct way. So they're both kind of set in their minds, set in their ways, convinced of their own right. And so they're both annoying when it comes to that. But yeah, Gia, she just rubs me the wrong way. You know, she's in power, she is hiding a lot of stuff from people around her. People still don't know that, you know, like Jin, the general from the previous book, that she actually didn't, you know, like, that she didn't betray the Empire, that it was actually Gia who was plotting against everybody. And so she just has this ultimate agenda that she isn't informing people about. She has her own sort of plans and tactics. I can only fear for what it is going to be, because I'm kind of fearing that it's something like a genocide. And, you know, she is just not listening. She's just set in her ways, convinced that she knows what is right. And I kind of like, at least, that we have this meeting which Zomi and this other guy whose name I don't remember kind of outwit her by just kind of like getting her to agree to some small thing that seems to be like an easy thing for her to give into, and something that she would have to give into, or otherwise she would seem unreasonable, and then kind of steering things along so that she has to agree to more than she would have liked to agree, just because she didn't see where they were going with when they first got her to agree to like the first small thing. But yeah, no love for Gia here. She is basically also just sort of like accumulating power now, like she's the regent now and she's not letting go of that power, even though like there are some talks going on that, you know, she should pass it on to the heir, which with the absence of Timo would be Firo. However, you know, she's like, yeah, he's not ready, but that is causing some tension, of course, definitely between Firo and her. But yeah, I'm interested to see what will happen there, what will happen with the succession. I'm kind of curious as well what will happen with like the youngest siblings, so Farah, I think her name is, because she's mainly like into arts and seems to just be doing her own thing and not be interested in the politics or anything like that. But it would be interesting to see if she is going to at some point change or grow an interest in that, or maybe already has but just isn't really letting on. But so yeah, that is that side of the story at the moment. And then yeah, it's more or less where I am. I mean, like Thera and Takval have just like come up with this plan to try and overthrow things on the Ryukyu side, because there's going to be this big meeting of the new sort of like leader of the Ryukyu and all of his sort of like generals, let's call them, and so they are thinking of ambushing that, and I think things are gonna go horribly wrong at that. Morning. I want to first of all say F you to yesterday's Cleo, who decided that filming this update was going to be this morning's Cleo's problem, because this morning's Cleo is very tired. But so yeah, I have finished another part in the Veiled Throne. I am just over halfway through, and a whole lot has happened, so I definitely need to update a few times during the next part, because the whole rest of the book is the next part, and as I indicated, I'm like just over halfway through, so the whole next part is like 400 plus pages, so I'm definitely gonna make sure that I update you guys a few times throughout those. But so yeah, I mean, I think last time I checked in with you guys, I'd forgotten to also mention that Gia is clearly like brewing something up, because we have seen her like for what I mentioned back then was that we've seen her like preparing some sort of a new drug or something like that, but she was also like, as always, steering things everywhere around this world, because she basically made sure that the Ryukyu would find out that there is going to be an opening in the Wall of Storms within a few years' time, and so that you know, they can expect probably reinforcements at that point in time, which she is sending that information out to destabilize this whole political situation over there in I've forgotten what it's called now. It's something like not unrecognized Dara, but like unreclaimed Dara. I'm not entirely sure whether that is how they call it, but so basically that's gonna destabilize that entire region, and that is indeed what we see for the rest of that part, is that, you know, one of these stains, I think they're referred to, so the type of generals, one of these generals finds out that actually Tan Kamanake, something like that, has known all along, like not all along, but has known for a while that the Wall of Storms is going to open, but she hasn't informed the rest of the people that are, you know, like in her government, and so she's keeping that a secret, and so this general is kind of waiting for the moment to reveal this information. And then she also is just like actively looking for dirt on others, so she finds out that the son of the general that we met in the very first section of this book has basically been taught by a Dara teacher. This is very much something that is against the rules within this new society, because they don't want their kids to be taught by Dara natives, especially since they are like reimagining history, like certain events that were caused by the Ryukyu. They're saying that it's basically Kunigaru's fault, and so they don't want their kids to be taught by the Dara natives, to be taught the real history, to potentially become more Dara than Ryukyu, even though their parentage is Ryukyu. And so she basically destroys this whole village in a very brutal way that I'm not going to look up if it is indeed inspired by true events, because I do believe that the majority of this series is at least loosely inspired by true events, but Based off of some things I know about certain time periods in Chinese history, it is definitely possible that this was done to those people in reality. But so a very horrible, cruel scene in which a baby is basically killed, and then the whole village is killed or castrated or enslaved. So horrible treatment to the Dara people by this general, who then spills the beans in a very public way, so that because she is very and the good thing about this series is that Ken Leo is always very good at showing motivations of people. You don't have to agree with their motivations. I don't agree with Gia's motivations, for example. I don't agree with the motivations of this general, but you're always made to fully understand what leads them there, what are their feelings, how are they coming to these decisions, what in the past may have led them to them. So with Gia, for example, you know that she has had to suffer so much because of people in power making decisions for the people out on the field, for the people who are living their daily lives. And so her biggest motivation is just trying to get to a point where whoever sits on the throne doesn't really matter. Where it doesn't matter who sits the throne, it won't really have an impact on the people's lives. But this general, her motivations are basically just a fear of losing identity. She is seeing the people around her become less and less Liuku, embracing other cultures, and changing as a consequence. And this is a fear that we see in real life as well, of course, a lot of fear that triggers anger, that triggers hatred towards others, this fear of losing what it means to be your own culture. And so I understand the motivations. You get to understand the motivations in all of these instances. They're not just portrayed as horrible people. I mean, in the case of this general, it's pretty horrible, but you're not just like, it's not just like a black and white, the bad people, the good people, where you don't ever really look into what made these people do the things that they're doing. You're definitely given their motivations. But so basically she spills the beans in a very public forum, and in order to kind of save face, Tan Vernake decides that, you know, she's gonna embrace the new changes that this general is proposing, and she's gonna basically put this general in charge of like clearing out the government and finding traitors amongst them, finding people who aren't, you know, like who are embracing Dara culture too much, because she has also seen the writing on the wall, and she also agrees with what this general is saying, that when their Liuku counterparts are going to cross the wall of storms, if they see them, you know, like just being kind to the Dara people or commingling with the Dara people, the Liuku are not going to understand that. They're going to see the changes that have taken place within that society, and they're going to consider them as weak, because the Liuku people, their society is very much based off of strength. So yeah, we see all of that going down to shits. We know that Gia has also sent a message to her son, and we don't really know, like we know the message, I think, but there was something like hidden in the message, and I don't fully know what it is that is hidden in the message. But it seems to be that she is sacrificing Timu. I was already thinking that a little bit based on how she was talking about Timu most of the times and about her love for Timu. I was already kind of thinking that she was going to sacrifice him. And so a lot of times she's also talking about, you know, like when people accuse of her of like loving her son above all others, she's kind of talking about, yes, how much she loves her son, but there's some sort of a tension in that statement and in her feelings in those moments that make me think that she is preparing to sacrifice her son. In any case, she's doing atrocious acts, and she is justifying them to herself, but also very much guilt-ridden and feeling the consequences. But her motivations, they make sense, but it's very much giving like some of the worst crimes in history have been made with the best of intentions. She, in her mind, is justifying everything that she's done because the Dara Empire and the Dara people are the most important. So if she has to make some of them suffer in order to save the majority, if she has to create some instability for what she sees as the best path forward, then she will do that because her ultimate goal is still the health, survival and happiness of the Dara people. However, the fact that she has to justify it like that to herself, the fact that she is so guilt-ridden, makes it clear that she knows that she's doing horrible things, that she knows that she's doing things that morally are not acceptable. And so, yeah, she might not be the one responsible for most of the harm happening to the Dara people right now, but she is the instigator. Nobody knows it is her fault, and you cannot just like talk that away and be like, yeah, but like in the end the majority are going to be just fine. Like, that's not up to you to decide. Yes, I guess that she, because she is the regent, that it is kind of up to her to decide, but even a regent would, like a wise regent would consult with others, check that their opinion of what is best for the people aligns with other people's opinion of what is best for the people, or listen to different parties and then decide based on their arguments what the best path forward is. But she isn't even sharing what she's doing. She's not sharing anything with anybody because she knows that nobody agrees with her. So, yeah. And then we have the Terra and Tarvak side of things, where things are going to shit now. Like, I knew it was going to go to shit because things were going too well there, and like I knew things were definitely going wrong when she was basically in her internal monologue was basically saying like, if only the Dara people knew that we were so close to solving their problems that they don't need to worry. And then it's like, we're midway through the book, they're gonna have to worry. But so basically we still have a little bit more of that sort of like, I think that this is very realistic. We have there multiple times now kind of coming to the realizations that her views and the way that she's like so certain of the superiority of her way of thinking or the way of thinking of her people, that is kind of questioned by the Agon people, and that she's kind of put in her place there. So we have this again now here with like the written language, and I do agree with her that they need to learn written language in order to move forward, in order to pass on information in a more sort of like easy way, and a way that is more like suits itself more to mass reproduction of knowledge, right? Like knowledge boomed once the written word was there, or once printing was there, for example. And so I do agree with her on that there's huge value in them learning a script, learning to write down and pass on memories like that. But she's also put in her place to show that language is a living thing, and the way that the traditions that they've had, the way that they go about passing knowledge on has huge merit as well, and is a living thing. So they have this beautiful tradition of like sand, sort of like not sculptures but sand art, let's just call it, that is based off of storytelling and of movement, and because of the vibrations of the movement, the sand kind of swirls and makes these sort of beautiful tapestries. And so she is very much mesmerized by this whole performance and sees that yes, the Agon also have a point, and she was not listening to them, but yes, their way of writing or their way of passing on history, that also it's a living thing, it's a cultural thing, it's part of their tradition, it has a huge value that you cannot just literally transpose into a written text. And so the two need to somehow live side by side as well. The written text can definitely be there to help society move forward, to teach more people, to reach wider, but something definitely will get lost in translation. Something definitely will get lost if the people are at some point only taught through the written word, and they no longer get to see these performances and feel the emotions that are in that performance, in that recounting of history. So yeah, I think there is like a normal person who's learning and who's growing. She is stubborn in her ways and will still holds on to old ways of thinking, because your way of thinking doesn't change overnight. It doesn't change from one moment to the next. And so the fact that she's come multiple times to the same realization, being like, oh yeah, right, there is value in what the Agon are telling me. Yes, I should listen to what they're telling me and learn from what they're telling me, is very natural, I think. I would hope that we switch at some point to her not holding on to her own view so much, and like proactively starting to think like, okay, I've seen in the past that when I've dismissed their views and their ways of doing things, that there turned out to be some real value there. But it is also normal for that maybe not to always, not always come immediately, for her to move steps forward but also move steps back, or move steps forward in certain areas and in other areas still like hang on to certain things that are kind of limiting her worldview, because she's not opening up to the other perspectives the way that she sometimes realizes that is also good for her and her people. And I like that Tarvak also calls her out on calling the Dara people her people and the Agon like his people, because they have been together for like 8 years right now. So yes, if she's still seeing them as those people, as us versus them, then she hasn't really embraced the idea of being their leader as well, of trying to get their two people to work together and to become one. At least in that settlements, they have been one. They have been living together for 8 years now. But so yeah, everything has gone to shit now, because somehow the Liuku have found out about their little rebellion, and they have most likely killed Tarvak's uncle, and have now slaughtered a huge part of this newly mixed society. Now I do still kind of think that maybe the uncle just betrayed them, and so maybe they will find out that it was actually the uncle who was responsible, but we'll have to see about that, I guess. Because now they basically just kind of assume that the uncle is innocent, and that the fact that the Liuku are there means that they must have discovered that he was lying, and so must have killed him and then moved over to toward his plan. But how did they know about the plan unless he spilled the beans? Maybe under pressure, of course, but I think we need some clarity on that. And so yeah, now they're set back a whole lot in their plans towards the Liuku from crossing over the Wall of Storms, and they have like about a year, I think she just calculated. Yeah, and then we have then basically more or less the end of this part. I'm very curious to see what happens now. I'm curious as well for the little boy of the general who was being trained by the Dara teacher, because he has been led to he was supposed to be killed, and his mother arranged for pirates to smuggle him out. But at the very end of this section we see the gods intervene, and we see the gods kind of capsize the ship, because the intention of his mother was basically for him to become a spy in Dara society. And so I don't know whether the intention is just to capsize him in order for him to drown, but I don't think so. I think that he'll probably survive and play some sort of a role, just probably not the role that was intended for him by his mother or by the Tan Bernaka, something like that. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what happens in the next section. And I guess one thing that I really have never really properly spent the time digesting, and therefore is now also sections that I just kind of glaze over are the sections with the gods, because I had never spent the time to learn who is whose god and which god is like got which avatar, because basically the whole series also looks at the gods and the gods conversation about what the people are doing, and each one of these gods is basically kind of sponsoring like one human who they are using to kind of steer the story in one way or another, to kind of steer humanity one way or another. And so very often when one of them does one of these people does something very stupid or something like that, then the other gods will kind of comment about it, but I haven't really kept track of that. And so here as well, when they capsize that boat, it is one of these gods kind of deciding to do so, to show the might of the gods and the way that the gods are no longer passively standing by, but are actually actively taking part in the story. And so at this point in time I almost feel like it's a lost cause for me to go back to that, but maybe I should spend some effort on at least trying to figure out the names of these gods again, and like which gods are representing what. But I don't think that, because that I assume is somewhere in the name of characters at the beginning, but like who they're all like, who's their puppets, that I don't think I can easily find back like that. Alright, so it has been a little bit longer I feel like, but I mean it's been less than a week since I last updated you guys I think, but so I am about 100 pages further into the Veiled Throne, and yeah, things are happening, you know. So as indicated, they were like on the run because the Liuku found out their hiding spots and they came after them, and so now Thera was like on the run, and actually basically her children have just been abducted. We have had a conversation take place between Zomi and Gia that annoyingly enough I agreed with Gia on. So Zomi is basically kind of trying to restructure the grand examination, and in doing so she's changed some of the rules. So before that it was like mandatory to use the old analog logograms, and she's like changed it so that now it will just be like the new way of writing. I forgot the name of saying it, that can be used. And she's also saying like people need to pull in their personal experiences into the examination, and don't have to refer to like the classical scriptures in order to defend their thesis. However, a lot of backlash has come from that. A lot of backlash, people are refusing to take the grand examination. She has had to postpone the grand examination by a few days already, and so she is just like in conversation with Gia about this. Gia kind of brings up like, look, I know that your intention is to make this a examination that is more accessible to everybody. However, you also need to listen to these people, because you're trying to make it more accessible to the poor, but it's actually also the poor who are complaining about these new rules and who are refusing to accept them. And Zomi is very much sort of like we've seen with Thera in the second part, Zomi is very much sort of like convinced of her right and of seeing it in the right way, and Gia is basically just pointing out that she needs to listen to the people and listen to their arguments, and kind of be open to the idea that she is wrong about these things. Yes, she used to be poor, so she is speaking from personal experience. She is part of that group. However, you know, no group is a unity. There are very disparate opinions within each group, and she needs to be open to listening to those. Aside from that, she's also so far removed from that perspective that she might not be fully in touch with it anymore. And so what she's saying is that, you know, if she listens to the people, she will find out that many of them have a association, or a have like nostalgic feelings about the analogograms because of rituals that are part of the culture. And so removing them from this grand examination might be a way to make access to education more universally accessible, but it removes some of the heart and soul from it, some of the some of the warmth from it that people have culturally grown. And aside from that, she's also pointing out, like, you know, the poor are kind of probably fearing that people will resent them for having reached this level because of the fact that they brought down these standards. They will see it as being considered of a lesser value than the degrees that were handed out before that. And so I, for once, agree with Gia on something, but it's also because it had nothing to do with the plotting of Gia and with the whole conflict and all of that. But what I've mainly been enjoying so far, and what the main focus has been so far in these final 100 pages that I've just read, is the character of Savo, I want to say, it's something like that. So the son of the Ryuko general, who had to run away from the society that Tan has been establishing, because she was going to have him killed for being taught by a Dara teacher. And so he is now in Dara society, pretending to be a Dara native, hiding his true identity, knowing that he would definitely be in big trouble if people found out that he's actually Ryuko, or like half Ryuko, I guess, that would jeopardize his future. And so he's pretending to be Dara, and he's been kind of taken in by this sort of like found family, and so he's working in this restaurant. And I like seeing him being confronted with Dara society as it is, because he's very much been brought up in a certain way where he's been taught certain beliefs about what the Dara people is like, what Dara society is like, the values that the Dara uphold, and he's now seeing the reality and how that clashes with his idea of what Dara should be. And so I like that we also see that he's kind of like thinking like, I wish I could talk to this or that general so that he could explain me like how I'm misinterpreting what I'm seeing here, which is still kind of showing that reliance on his teachers, the reliance on the way that he's always been taught to interpret things. So he's kind of like missing this person who can interpret events for him, and hopefully he's now starting to interpret things for himself. But I love that we're seeing this side of the story now, because we are entering a cooking competition. So this is why this series is so wild, because for the first 500 pages, if anyone would have told me that like this story was going to majorly focus on a cooking competition in the second part, I would have been like, how? But somehow we are here. And I've already kind of looked forward to some of the chapters that are to come, just when I was trying to see like, okay, where am I gonna stop for today then? And I've seen that quite a lot of chapters really have to do with a cooking competition, so we're really gonna look at it in great detail. And I just absolutely enjoy that. We're gonna look at this competition between basically an established restaurant, and basically this sort of like crook had tried to discredit the restaurant, and and they saw through his plot and were able to basically just kind of deflect his schemes, and as a consequence he has now started his own restaurant, hired some sort of like son of an elusive chef to help out his restaurants, and in the meantime the chef of the long established restaurant is like dealing with extreme stress from hearing about who the chef is of the other restaurant, so he cannot continue on. And then there's another thing going wrong with supplies and stuff like that, I think, with this restaurant. So we've got a lot of drama going on with this cooking competition, and I gotta say, like, this doesn't feel like we should be focusing on this, but I'm here for it. I'm all here for it. Give me this cooking competition. I am very much invested, even though I know I should be invested in like the grand scheme of the Ryuko and the Agon and the Dara, because a lot of that is going very, very wrong. But yes, give us some light-hearted cooking competition that's probably gonna turn out to not be all that light-hearted at all by the time we're through with it. Well, good morning. I have finished the Veiled Throne, yeah, well, I would say yesterday, but that's a total lie. Finished a few days ago actually. And I haven't really updated you guys a lot about the final part of this book. And I gotta say, my major qualm with that is just the length of the chapters. I enjoyed what was happening, I enjoyed our focus on this sort of like culinary competition, but all of the chapters were really, really long, which felt like a little bit of a, which like really was a structural change with the rest of the book, you know, like before that chapters had also been long, but it hadn't been to the extent like every single chapter about the culinary competition had to be split into two by my audiobook. So that section was just like a very long section with not that many chapters, and they were just like most of the chapters were about the culinary competition, and then we would occasionally get like a chapter that would be focusing on the other parts, so going back to Gia, going back to Thera, but those would be like super short. So our main focus definitely was on the culinary competition within this one. I enjoyed the culinary competition a whole lot. Like we have like different stages to the competition. You had the first stage, which was like based on the food, and then we can kind of see how they're going for like two different strategies initially, but then they kind of basically go for the same sort of like success strategy, which is sort of like having your food tell a story. So the one end, the competitors are basically going for like a very like high-end type of cuisine, whereas our team is going for very simple food, but they both end up going for this sort of like storytellers strategy of like having your story relate back to some story that everybody is familiar with, or some history that everybody is familiar with, and thus kind of appealing to the emotional side of people and letting that food like be related to a story that they know very well, and that elevating the food that they are consuming by consequence. And so basically they were about to win that round. However, the sort of cook from the other team kind of comes around and basically begs them to relinquish their lead, because, you know, she is going to be threatened by this Outtro, I think his name is, if she were to lose the competition, and her family members will also be threatened. And so they decide to help her out and to waive that round of the competition. Second round of the competition was the serving staff, where like Outtro basically just creates this sort of like massive problem for our staff by having like food delivered, and then if that food is consumed in combination with a certain drink, then the people get sick. So almost everybody on the staff gets sick, and there's this sort of like superstitious belief about a certain like plague that they have going on at that point in time. I think it's rats or mice or something like that, and people start to believe that this place is sort of like cursed. So a lot of the waiters are also just like quitting because they don't want to work there, and so like even though they cleanse the restaurant and all of those things, spiritually cleanse it, there's just like a lot of problems with serving staff, because they were thinking like, okay, we've got this in the bag, you know, the serving staff of the new restaurant is new, they don't know one another, there's too many people on that serving staff, so, you know, it will just make it difficult for them to not get in each other's way. And the first reviews for the restaurants have not been positive in terms of the serving staff in any case. And so our staff was like thinking, our team was thinking like, okay, we've got this in the bag, we've got years of experience working here, this team is super tight, we know one another, we are very well tuned, but then most of them have to bow out because of illness or because of fear for this curse. And so they have to come up with a new solution. In the end, they decide to go for this sort of like solution of creating these sort of robots to help with the serving, which is then also a form of entertainment at the same time, because it's a novelty, nobody's ever seen it. And so all the people who go to this restaurant, who initially aren't that many, because basically people are just like wanting to go to the new restaurant and not to the old one, because they're also hearing about all these bad things that are happening in that restaurant, you know, like with the mice invasion, with serving staff getting ill, and so they're all like a little bit hesitant about going there. But when they go there, they find this new way of serving like super exciting and entertaining, and so it's a big success for our team, luckily. And then finally, in the final round, we have the entertainment round, and I gotta say that I'm already a little bit hazy on the entertainment round. What happened there? Yeah, it is a good question. I really have no idea anymore what happened in the entertainment rounds. Whoops. Conclusion being, they win the entire competition. Because of Outtro having cheated, and Outtro basically has to go on the run for that, I believe, as well. It kind of felt like a little bit of an anticlimactic ending, because so I would have like, it felt like we had to like end on the apotheosis of them winning this competition. And then basically we've won this competition and we're sitting around and saying like, oh, I would really like to go to this sort of like banned island where people cannot really go, where this sort of like official facility is that will have documented like all things from the past. And then the people from like the sort of like troubadour troupe, they basically really want to go there, and they end up going there. But it felt like a little bit of a weird spin, you know. This whole competition all of a sudden starts to feel like, we had to do this whole competition in order for us to get to this point, in order for us to go to this island and seek out information over there. You know, I'm not mad about the competition being there at all. It just felt a little bit like a weird side tangent that was taking up like half of the book. That just felt like it was coming out of nowhere, was like stealing all the attention away from these very important things that we had going on in the first half of the book, to then kind of towards the end steer everything sort of like back to the center of what had been going on. And so we go to this island, and basically one of the troubadour troupe really wants to look into the history of Jin Misoto, because he doesn't believe that she betrayed the empire, and so he's looking for proof of that. And meanwhile, our guy, and his name is always escaping me. I always want to call him Sappho, but that's definitely not his name. But it is something like that. Yeah, here it's called Kinri, but he also has his sort of like, you know, his Ryuku name that I cannot come up with right now, and he's always called Kinri in this section, it seems like. But it's okay. Kinri basically is very hesitant about this, because basically he realizes that he is in a perfect position on that island to find out secrets about Dara inventions, about Dara technology, that he can report back to his Ryuku mother and the Ryuku queen, basically. And so he is trying to avoid this at all costs, trying to steer himself on that island to join the persons who are going to go and look into something that has no advantage to the Ryuku whatsoever. And so this whole section has been very much about him and his loyalties and his conflicted loyalties, about him coming to terms with the way that things have been presented to him and seeing the reality of what Dara is, and being like, Dara is nothing like what I've been told that it is. I've been told wrong versions of history, I've been told things about the Dara that are not true or that are exaggerations. Yes, the Dara do a lot of infighting, there's a lot of political play happening there as well, but there are also really good people in Dara with really good intentions. And that has really been the focus of this section, basically. And so in this facility, they're basically finally caught out. But the way that they basically infiltrated this facility was by having him impersonate Zomi, because the troubadours basically first noticed him when they first saw him, and they felt like he looked a lot like Zomi. And so this is when we find out that he has basically is related to Zomi, because his father is the same father that Zomi has. And so we have this whole conversation between Zomi and him, kind of figuring out his past, Zomi being very you know, closed off and hesitant to accept him, and very much feeling like skeptical of him and his intentions and why he is there, until she finds out that he is his brother. And then she's kind of more or less immediately willing to accept him and see him as a brother, and be like, ah, no, okay, I was wrong about you. You're actually Dara, and you've been through like a horrible ordeal having grown up with the Ryuku, and so now you can finally be free in Dara the way you always were supposed to be. And she immediately seems to assume that that is his wish, that he just wants to be 100% Dara, and that he is rejecting his Ryuku heritage, whereas things are definitely a lot more complicated on his end. Yes, he has grown to love Dara and the Dara people and the Dara princess, but it isn't as simple as that, meaning that, you know, he sees the Ryuku as pure evil, and that there is no value in the Ryuku, that his mother, who Zomi kind of instinctively assumes is some horrible person, that is how he feels. No, he loves his mother. His mother has been there all of his life. And so we kind of immediately see this disconnect between Zomi's assumptions and the reality of the complexity of feeling that Kinri has. And so then Zomi kind of shows her dark side, I guess, because she basically becomes like super harsh with him. But when she realizes that he does not want to return to Dara with them, that he does not want to relinquish his Ryuku heritage, she's like, fine, then I'll just force you to come back to Dara with us, then I'll force you to go with us. You won't have the honor of being my brother, you won't have the honor of being free, you'll just be like imprisoned by us. And then luckily he is saved from that fate by Farah, who basically ensures that there's a way for him to be saved by the troubadour troupe, so that he can go on his own way. But so, I love the relationship between Farah and Kinri, because I love the slow build we had for that. You know, we've seen that there was interest from his side, at least from the very beginning. We suspected there's interest from her side from the very beginning, because we do see her looking at him from time to time. But we just slowly see them having certain scenes together, doing things together, her getting to be really herself, at least in her actions, when she is around him and in that role that she is playing there. And so them getting to know each other true and true in their real identities, even though they don't know the other's identity. And if he would have known from the beginning that he was courting a Dara princess, he would probably have steered very much clear of it, because he would have felt that that was way too dangerous considering what his mother wants him to do. But I love their relationships. I'm sad to see them going apart now. I hope we do get them back together in the fourth and final book. I'm sure we will, but I'm just hoping for a happy ending for them, and not some sort of like dramatic, disastrous acts to happen when it comes to them. But yes, I love them a whole lot, and I really like this book. I think this book does feel like it is two books in one, because of the way in which that final section is so fully focused on that cooking competition. Because I feel like structurally it could have been a little bit tighter, I guess, if we would have stuck to the sort of like, let's just look at one place at a time sort of like chronology. And so I feel like that could have, like, that just felt a little bit structurally messy to have it play out like that. That final section then just felt a little bit like, okay, but what is happening with the rest of them? Like, we've spent so much of our attention on Gia and Thera in the second part, and now we're barely seeing anything of them. We're just like occasionally like seeing a glimpse of what's happening with them, as sort of as like, don't forget about these characters. Whereas we've just been in part 2 setting up massive events, and then in part 3 zooming in on this sort of like very specific smaller things. So structurally speaking, I would say that it is a little bit messy, but emotionally speaking, I will say that I loved every second of this book. So yes, I really enjoyed myself with this one a whole ton, and I'm very much looking forward to picking up the 4th and final book within this series. I will be sad when this is over and I no longer have further adventures of these characters to follow, but I just hope that my characters make it through the next book. I don't think we lost a major player within this book, right? Like, we've seen some horrible events take place, but I don't think we've lost any major character. Like, there are some that have been abducted and things like that, but in the end there's none that we have had to say goodbye to, right? So that's a good thing, but that might just mean that it's all gonna be saved for book 4. I do enjoy, which I think at the beginning of this I also said, or I said it at the end of the previous vlog, but I do enjoy that the entire book was keeping both sides separate from one another. The breach in the Wall of Storm hasn't happened yet, and interestingly enough, actually I expected the breach in the Wall of Storms to, if it wasn't gonna happen throughout this book, to basically be like the end. The end point is basically like the moment before it's going to open, or the moment in which it's opening. And so interestingly enough, we're still like months away from that moment. So I guess the opening of the Wall of Storm is gonna be like the final part or so of Speaking Bones, or we're gonna have a little bit of a time jump at the beginning of Speaking Bones. But yes, I enjoyed having this sort of like status quo at the moment in terms of no new troop movement being possible either way around. But so yeah, I'm gonna leave you guys with this. This update has been very long. I don't know how long the entire vlog will have been, but yes, I'm very much looking forward to Speaking Bones. I will be picking it back up when I'm back from London so that I can put my full attention on it and I don't need to like take a break from it while I'm in London. So yeah, you should be getting the next vlog somewhere in the beginning of September, I think. Currently planning to get it done then, but it'll depend on my speed with Speaking Bones and with the other books on my TBR. So yeah, thank you guys for watching, and hope you guys enjoyed this video, and see you guys for the next one. Bye!